Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 3 of season 2 of Babylon 5, The Geometry of Shadows. Franklin is testing the quality of Garibaldi's recovery. Whilst Garibaldi is doing his best to make out he's doing better than average, Franklin's having none of it. However, he could be back to work in a day provided he doesn't exert himself. He needs to check in with Sheridan, who he's not sure about given how many people wanted Sinclair out. Plus, he's questioning his own capabilities, having not realised his second-in-command was plotting against him. Imposter syndrome, in a sense. Lord Reefer is explaining that the Centauri were monitoring Quadrant 37 and the Narn build-up there when their probes started reporting nothing. They then confirmed the destruction, which Reefer is of course intrigued by, given everyone thought Londo was insane when he said he'd take care of it. Vera is trimming Londo's hair whilst the conversation goes on. He is also there when Reefer starts talking about his people taking the Emperor down. The Emperor's son has died, leaving no clear line of succession, and he is frail and frightened. Force may be required to pave the way for Reefer and his supporters to take over, and Londo tacitly agrees to this, saying they have much to talk about. At no point does Londo reveal how he took out Quadrant 37. On the Zocalo, a fight breaks out between Drazi wearing purple banners and Drazi wearing green banners, seemingly owing to a minor shove. Reefer takes his leave of the station. As he departs, not one, not two, but 3 techno-mages come on board. Malari recognises them, but says they are rarely seen travelling outside their places of power, and they use signs to produce the appearance of magic. Seeing one is unusual. Seeing more than one is not a good sign. It turns out that once every 5 years the Drazi split into 2 camps, green and purple, with whichever side wins the most fights becoming dominant in their society for the next 5-year cycle. Sheridan sees this as timely, as he can delegate handling the problem to Susan, who he promptly promotes to commander. She is tasked with finding a peaceful solution as she enjoys her fresh orange juice with the pulp left in. Elsewhere, the techno-mages are gathering. Londo sits Veer down, asking him if he believes in fate. He sort of does. Londo thinks that getting the blessing of techno-mages would sell well back home, and tasks Veer with getting an audience with them. Veer is not keen on this as a concept, and tries to steel himself by taking a swig of a drink left on the bar. He promptly passes out flat. In his quarters, Garibaldi cleans his PPG. Sheridan visits him, noting that he thought Garibaldi would come to him. Garibaldi is straight with him about his self-doubts, and Sheridan understands, but thinks he's the best man for the job and wants him, so leaves him to consider, saying that he'll hold his job open for him as long as he can. Meanwhile, Ivanova is accusing the Drazi of carrying on cranky Russian diplomacy. She's trying to figure out what the underlying issues are, and discovers to her bemusement that it's utterly random. Stick your hand in a barrel, pull a ribbon out, and that's it, you are whatever colour you pull out. And 2 ribbons are leadership ribbons. No rhyme or reason to it. Unfortunately, all hell then breaks loose when Ivanova double sashes one of the Drazi with both colours, and in the process she breaks her foot. Veer seeks out the techno-mages. After a little bit of a beastly intimidation on their part, Elric is sufficiently impressed by Veer's fortitude to at least speak with him, although he has 0 interest in private audiences or money because it will do them no good where they're going, which is a long, long way away. Do not try the patience of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger, says Elric, which I have a feeling might be a Lord of the Rings reference. And with that, the audience ends. Ivanova's foot is definitely broken, and the only option is a cast, so Ivanova needs to change her approach to the Drazi. Veer is trying to explain to Londo that his usual Centauri methods of influence, wealth and power mean nothing at all to the techno-mages because they're going away, but Londo doesn't get it. Interesting indication of the differences in their mindsets. Veer does get it. Lou Welsh is asking Garibaldi when he's coming back, reference to a changing net from the gathering when Garibaldi discovers Lou has passed on cake for 2 days. Londo has gone to Sheridan to end run round his problem, suggesting that the techno-mages are troublemakers and he could mediate. As it turns out, Earth would like to know more about why they're emigrating, so Londo's offer of assistance is accepted, although Sheridan isn't as naive about Londo's motivations as Londo believes him to be. There's always an angle with the Centauri, and he knows it, but a meeting will be arranged. It turns out that the green Drazi on their homeworld have escalated matters. Now they're killing purples, not just beating them up, and the local Drazi have heard. Ivanova has multiple purple casualties in the council chambers. The Technomage meeting is going about as well, with Sheridan and Elric winding each other up. There are apparently over 100 Technomages on board at this point, and Elric doesn't want to share their plans. Sheridan is far too blunt, showing his inexperience. Londo arrives, and Elric notes that Sheridan has been used, displaying a hologram of Veer's attempt to arrange an audience. The hands of friendship are offered by Londo, and Elric accepts, but we see that Londo has planted a spy camera as he was putting his drink down in the room, and Elric says that he hopes Londo won't try and use the gesture as an endorsement, before he blows up his camera and pulls him very, very close to him to make clear his displeasure. Elric and Sheridan carry on their conversation after Elric has given Londo a piece of his mind. Elric explains his people are dreamers, shapers, singers and makers. They tread a line between magic, myth and science, blurring them. He says there is a black and terrible storm coming, and they are going away to preserve the special knowledge that they have gathered, and to prevent its misuse. He will not tell Sheridan where they are going, but asks him instead to trust him, passing him an orange blossom as he departs. Sheridan had just mentioned liking the smell of them when he was a child. Ivanova, on crutches, goes to the green Drazi camp. One of them tells her not to interfere in the natural selection going on. However, as it turns out, they've used her name to do just that, bringing purples into Brown 29, where they can flush a couple of thousand of them into space, or at least asphyxiate them. Delightful. Then the green Drazi leader reassures her peace will return to the station. Garibaldi runs into Welch as he's making arrangements for this meeting, but Garibaldi smells a rat because Welch didn't actually speak to Ivanova. The message came from her link, yes, but no personal contact. So now, even though he's not back on duty, he is. Masquerading as a travelling salesman, he makes a house call on Green Drazi headquarters and liberates Ivanova. In Londo's quarters, an inventive hollow demon is munching its way through his data files, buying shares in a spoo ranch and generally causing a significant nuisance of itself, whilst blasting out non-opera, much to both Centauris disgust. It turns out Ivanova hasn't quite done her homework. A Drazi cycle isn't a week, it's a year, and so the contest is going to go on for 1.2 human years. They were planning on keeping the purple Drazi on ice until the contest was over. Hilariously, whilst making her point again about how utterly arbitrary the whole thing is, although the Drazi leader points out we do the same thing over flags, Ivanova grabs the green leader's sash, causing all the Drazi to freeze. It turns out that their rules of combat predate contact with alien species, so by simple virtue of holding the leadership sash, Ivanova, even as a human, is now the green leader. Rule change still in committee, apparently. Her plan? Lock up the ones who assaulted her and dye all the other greens purple. Problem solved. On the station, at least. Malari eventually apologises to the Technomages, although they give him going away presents. Garibaldi is finally back in uniform, having accepted that this is indeed the job for him. The Technomages are ready to depart, and Londo thanks Elric for his gift, although he's not sure when the smell will depart from his quarters. Elric says he has lifted the spell, but says Londo has made other mistakes that will have consequences, that he is touched by darkness. Elric says this blemish will grow with time, but Londo would not listen to warnings, and if he killed him, he would be replaced. He sees Londo's hand reaching out of the stars, with billions of people calling his name. Londo asks if they're his followers. Elric says they're his victims. And that is all the endorsement Elric will give, worthless to Londo as it is. Sheridan grants the Technomage's ship permission to jump, saying as he holds his orange blossom that part of him that does still believe in magic hopes that they will see Technomages again, even though Elric said they were gone for good. This is a seemingly low-key episode, but there's a lot of foreshadowing here about what might be in store for Londo. I have to confess I just listened to the commentary for this one with Claudia, Bruce and Jerry to see if I was misremembering something, which I was, and oh god, they had fun on that show. They just bounce off one another in real life brilliantly, and from the sound of it, it was almost 10 years since they'd filmed the episode when they did the commentaries. I also discovered that Elric was one of the original Star Trek Klingons, it seems. As I've noted before, the show often brings in established genre artists to perhaps avoid surprises in how they treat the shows. So, what we have here is a Centauri intrigue main plot, with the Drazi as light relief and the Techno-Mages being used as a tool to hint at darker times ahead. As we saw in Signs and Portents in Season 1, high-ranking Centauri frequently have the current Emperor in their sights, and you get the impression that Reefer is pretty serious about his regime change intentions on this front. It also seems that Londo rates his ability to get it done, and so is prepared to align himself with him given his new allies. So the game is afoot. Speaking of afoot, I know, seamless, right? Claudia broke her foot for real, but before she's seen breaking it in the show. So when she gets knocked down by the Drazi fighting, her foot is actually already broken, bless her, so not much acting was required to visualise the pain. Thusly was her real-world injury worked into the show's plot, though it's pointed out in the commentary her crutches aren't very space-age. Fortunately, we never see the Drazi hit another cycle of purple and green, as it would be beyond the end of the show, but it is of course ironic that they should choose sides so randomly when the same could be said of politicians the world over. The resolution is very entertaining of course, and it provides a nice way to bring Garibaldi back into the fold. Now, in terms of arc, it's the Techno-Mages who are the real players in this episode. As Londo tells us, they've been around for a very, very long time since the start of the Centauri Empire, and they are very, very capable individuals who you do not mess with. Yet they have no clear agenda beyond the gathering and of course preservation of knowledge. And that knowledge is telling them to get the hell out of the galaxy in essence, because they can see a storm coming that could wipe their knowledge out, and also they don't want it misused. Elric doesn't link Londo directly to the storm, but he does allude to him simply being a piece that can be replaced, and that he will create victims on an immense scale through his actions. Londo is, of course, a master at dismissing facts that do not benefit him, and Elric acknowledges this, so this commentary is more for us than Londo, perhaps, but maybe it does give him some pause, because it really wasn't the endorsement he was hoping for at the start of the episode. The interaction between Sheridan and Elric plays out very nicely, and wouldn't have been out of place in the first season as it's very much signs and portents driven. I also enjoy Elric always being 3 steps ahead of pretty much everything. Great fun to watch. You do wonder what would happen if they did actually pick a side rather than walking their own path. Many I think would have loved a spin-off series focusing on them, which Crusade did actually do in an oblique way, but that would probably have removed too much mystery from them. I believe there were books about them, however, but I've not read them. I enjoyed this episode. The Techno-Mages were a fresh, new and intriguing element for the mythos of the show's universe, and the production quality was right up there. I noticed how in the background, before we learn about the Drazi purple-green issue, there's already a Drazi wearing a sash in shot. Clever. Plus, there are a hell of a lot of Drazi prosthetics in use simultaneously, and they're such good quality pieces, you don't question them for a second, even given the amount of speaking they're doing. There are also different standard shots being used, more internal shots of the station and Sheridan's office from the outside. It really feels like the show has grown into itself more, if that makes sense. Okay, thanks for listening. If it sounds a little different, it's because I've now moved house and this room's a lot smaller, so I'll see if I need to adapt. I definitely need to get a few more reviews queued up now, although I'm hoping to not move again anytime soon. Catch you for the next one.